Hello, I'm Bobby Botticelli from Colonial Manor Realty, and welcome to Colonial Manor Realty presents Real Estate with the Pros. Today we have two guests, and our first guest is Captain Scott Myatt from the Reading Fire Department. Welcome, Captain.
Thank you for having me. Appreciate it.
Now, the reason I had the captain come in is because when we go out to do smoke detector certifications for closings, many people aren't aware that there's been a new law. It's so new that it's 10 years old now. And the new law or guideline for your smoke detectors is that they have to be 10-year sealed batteries. And that's why I asked Captain Myatt to come explain to us the difference between the detectors. And it's not just the smoke detectors, but we also have to be concerned with carbon monoxide. So, monoxide, not monoxide. So, Scott, why don't you tell us about the situation about, and it applies to hardwired as well as battery.
So that I believe the hardwire has been a recent change to go to the 10-year sealed.
Is there a grandfather date on that if the house was built prior to such a time, or is it not?
So in 1975, anything built before 1975 is the big trip where you can have battery operated detectors only, as opposed to hardwired and battery.
So after 1975, any house built after that has to be hardwired. And what is the code regarding in every bedroom? Because I know that's different than used to be also.
Yeah, so the current code requires smoke detectors within every bedroom. They also require a detector immediately in the immediate vicinity of the bedrooms. And it's further broken down to say 10 feet. Within 10 feet of a bedroom door, you need a carbon monoxide detector. Typically, that's
not just at the top and bottom of staircases. Now it's within 10 feet of a bedroom.
correct.
And I know that there's a guideline, how many inches away from the wall, and
Typically,
can't be on a wall, has to be on the ceiling. And
yeah, we require them to be mounted on the ceiling. They can't be within 6 inches of the wall. The reason is you kind of get the smoke will kind of go right by that area, and you don't technically need one at the top of every set of stairs. We often see them there because that's often within the 10 feet of the bedroom. It's a good place to kind of catch everything, especially in a central staircase structure.
the most confusing homes are the ones that are multi-levels, like a multi-level or a split. So, you come down the stairs, 8 steps, and there's one. Then you go down maybe 6 more stairs, and there's one. And you don't need one now at the top where the living room is, you're saying, because that's already in the hall.
Correct.
Okay. And with carbon monoxide, what is the deal with those? Every living level, even a basement that's not lived in?
So if it's not a habitable level, meaning there's no finish to the basement, you don't need one within the basement itself. Most houses do, and a lot of the detectors are combination detectors now, so it's smoke and carbon. So I always recommend using that at the base of every set of stairs.
And I believe that you've also told us that if it's plugged in, it also has to have a battery backup in case you lose power.
Correct.
Is that true? And that's for both the smoke detectors aren't plugged in, they're hardwired, but do they also have a battery in them? The hardwired ones?
Correct, yep.
So if you lose the power to that, do you go into many homes? Why would you be going in them other than do an inspection? But do you find many homes that when you get in there, the detectors hanging from the ceiling with no batteries because, the burnt toast situation and all that? What do you do with that?
We see it quite often when we're called to a house for whatever emergency reason. We often discover that the house doesn't have sufficient smoke detectors. We speak to the people then and ask them to rectify it. A lot of times when we run into cases with elderly, we have a senior safe program that will have a couple detectors available to them, and we go out and we have one gentleman that goes out and can mount detectors for elderly if they are in need.
So that senior safe program, though, you're only going to know about it if you go in because there was an emergency or the detector went off or didn't go off.
Mm-hmm. And we're limited with the funding to that. That's it's difficult to, say, oh sure, we'll supply. We'd love to be able to supply detectives for everybody in town. It's just not.
Well, like everything, yeah, funds are limited. Well, speaking of the seniors, I had offered a program, and I have to be honest, I didn't get much response for it, that I would pay for smoke detectors or carbon monoxide for elderly. I was really looking to see those who were in need first, and I spoke with Chief Nelson, and he said, okay, Bob, you supply them, we'll put them up. So I'd really like to tell people that if you're in financial need, or even if you need them, call us, because we go into homes and it is amazing how many homes we go into that just don't have them, not just the elderly, but I'm doing this program for the elderly, so if you do have a need for it, please let us know. What's the most detectors you've ever put in a house, do you think? Because some houses, it's like you need one around every corner, and other houses...
So you're actually limited to the amount of detectors that you can put within a house on a circuit if you're going with a standard full voltage system. And that's 12 smoke detectors. That doesn't include the heat detectors. If you have a heat detector in the garage, that doesn't count towards it. If your house requires more than 12, which a lot of the modern builds do, then you have to go to a low voltage system, like you'd see in a commercial occupancy.
And it works just as well?
They work differently. It's all controlled through a control panel, typically mounted somewhere near the front door of the house. And we can go in and kind of say, okay, we'll tell you exactly where the activation is, like outside the master bedroom, for example.
And I don't know that I was paying attention to your answer about an unfinished basement. Mm-hmm. Do you need one down there?
You need smoke detectors in an unfinished basement, yes.
But a carbon monoxide?
If it's unfinished, you do not need a carbon monoxide detector. Always recommended, though.
How about a walk-up unfinished attic? Smoke?
If it's unfinished, walk-up attic, you need a smoke detector.
But not a pull-down? You don't need one up there?
Correct.
Okay. Anywhere else in the house that I'm not thinking about that you might need one?
You always need a heat detector within the garage. And base of every set of stairs.
No, that's separate than the smoke detector.
They ring together. Yep. So it's not a smoke detector.
But you don't check those, do you? I don't remember anyone going in to check a heat detectors when we do them in the garages.
They should be checked just to make sure that they're also well within the dates, and that they're interconnected. Meaning, if the heat detector trips, it's going to make sure that the detectors in the house go off as well.
Boy, I just had another question right out of my head. That always happens.
Daily basis.
Well, you know what? You've answered a bunch of these questions. I know that people ask us all the time, and oh my God, these detectors look great, and they've been wonderful, and no, they're not so wonderful. So even if they're working, if they're over 10 years old. So everybody who has a new house that's 11 years old, they're no longer valid.
Correct.
And they are expensive, there's no question about it, but if you think about not having to put batteries in it every year, that saves you a few dollars, and your life, that saves your life. So
they really do save lives.
Have you yourself seen a situation where a smoke detector would have saved somebody's life or saved their home?
I have seen it where they have saved, where somebody wakes up in the middle of the night to a smoke detector alarming and a large fire within the house.
How long have you been doing this?
I've been doing it for 23 years.
Just a kid.
Don't feel it.
Okay.
We recently had a fire in town
We did.
that where the smoke detectors woke the family up, and they had a fire in the garage. And if they hadn't been alerted by the smoke detectors, excuse me, that was a heat detector.
Oh, that was a heat
detector
detector.
that activated. If the heat detector hadn't activated, then it would have been a delayed response for us, and they probably would have lost the whole house and hopefully not their lives. But
Is it possible for a heat detector to go off in a garage like a day like today, and then you come home and your car is hot and you close the garage door, and or is it, how many degrees does it have to be?
Every detector is a little bit. They make various different detectors on what degrees they trip. There's also rate of rise, meaning if you go up 20 degrees in 10 minutes, then it trips it, regardless of what the temperature is. If you have a significant temperature change, it trips it. There's a few locations in town that have heat detectors in attics, and we often go to those locations on days like today.
Speaking of going out, is there a charge when you have to go out? Like, if somebody has a detector that goes off every month, is there first one's free, second one you're going to get in trouble for? Or?
There's no real charge. If it's a commercial structure and they have nuisance alarms that go off fairly often, after I think it's usually 6, the first 6, then we can start charging $50 for every, I believe it's $50 for every time we go out. That doesn't happen very often. It's fairly rare. But when you get into a place where they're just like, oh yeah, we know there's a problem with the system, and they refuse to fix it, it's a little bit of an incentive for them to get their system fixed. So we can, we don't have those nuisance alarms, if you will.
And there is a charge when you do it for the sale of a property.
Correct.
We used to be the least expensive around, and we're still less expensive than other towns, but we're at 50?
We're at $50.
We were at 25 for years.
Correct.
And surrounding towns were at 100 a long time ago. So when people say 50, I say, well, it's still less than it's been.
Yes.
Yes.
So it's,
so that people know you can't just call the station and say, I'd like to have an inspection. You actually have to go online and do it. And then they set it up with you and you pay your fee, and that's how it gets done. Well, Scott, thank you so much for coming.
Thank you for having me.
I decided to do this in lieu of the several fires we had this past year, and again, going into homes and not seeing the proper inspection, the proper receptacles thinking, they need to have this done. So again, if you're a senior, and look up, is your smoke detector hanging out of your ceiling? Is it old? And there's a date on it, so you can tell.
Correct.
You can't necessarily climb up. Have somebody climb up and look at the date for you. And everybody should be checking theirs anyway and redoing them. But thank you very much. And this is a very hot day we're in here today, so it's one of the 90-degree days that, but that's okay, we'll be 50 tomorrow.
Well, we appreciate you doing this and appreciate you having me out.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Bye-bye. Now I'm here with Chuck Tyrone, Reading's very infamous conservation administrator for the last, 15, 16 years?
Yes.
And you know what? He really is a nice guy. I know you hear conservation and you panic, but if we call Chuck and do what we're supposed to do, maybe we won't get into trouble in the first place. So, I asked Chuck to give me a few questions that he thinks could be pertinent. And I have some too, but we're going to go with his first. And I think the first one is, what type of project triggers a wetland permit?
Yeah, so that's for this venue, I would say that there's 2 areas that you have to be careful of. So we have a wetland that casts a 100-foot buffer zone, and we have perennial streams that cast 200-foot riverfront areas. any work within those areas, even though they're dry, are jurisdictional, and you would need to at least contact the conservation office to, talk it over and find out if a permit is needed.
Well, dry now, there's an operative word there, because it doesn't always mean that it's wet. I mean, I abut Kirshen Woods, which isn't wet. It was left conservation for Mr. Kirshen for wildlife and whatever. But that's still in your purview, even though it's not wetlands and
So
we don't have green speckled salamander.
Right, so we're property owners at Kirchian. There may be some wetlands there. I mean, I think if you go in Veterans Way and you walk towards the right-hand side and you're going to be going up towards Franklin Street, there's wetlands there. It gets low.
There is, right. Yeah.
But most of that is a dry area. And so one of the misconceptions, I hear all the time, is people will say, wetland, we're in the wetland, or we're in conservation property or conservation issues. And people don't understand that we own the land, or it's your land, it's the owner's land, but it has a jurisdictional layer over it, just like in zoning. So wetlands can be on your property and you can own them 100%, but they're still regulated through the Massachusetts Wetlands Protection Act and our own town bylaw. And so through both of those regulations, we have the 100-foot and the 200-foot jurisdictional area. Another thing that comes up all the time is, hey, this is my land. Why can't I do this? And well, the Wetlands Protection Act has been around since the 70s.
1975, I think.
Yeah, and then the town had their own wetland regulations, and I believe in the 80s. I'm not, don't quote me on that, but later on they followed up with that, and that these things were all approved by voters, and so our regulations and the Wetlands Protection Act were approved by the Senate, the representatives, and then the voters. And so that was brought in, and the same goes for here. So nothing was passed by the Conservation Commission on their own. So we have a bylaw and we have regulations. So it's the bylaw that I'm talking about that was voted on by,
So
the
the
people of
state
Reading.
has guidelines, and then each town or city has their own? Or is
They're
it...
very similar. So usually what ends up happening is they just tweak them a little. A good example is in a wetland situation where you have that 100-foot in front of the wetland, so that the state has determined that area, that dry area in front of the wetland, is so likely to alter the wetland if work happens there that they want you to get a wetland permit, or they want you to talk to the conservation agent. So if you have that 100-foot and you're looking solely at the Wetlands Protection Act, you only have to prove where your property goes will not alter the wetland. So that means there's no jurisdictional setback. So you could theoretically get as close as you want. But that's not actually true, because you will alter the wetlands at some point and you will be pushed back and pushed up, we call it up gradient, but up the hill, away from the wetlands. The town has that same regulations or something very similar, but we've added to it to say at the 25 feet from the wetland, that's a zone of natural vegetation. And then 10 additional feet, so now we're 35 feet away, that would be a zone where we don't want to see structures. And we do this to protect the roots and to protect what happens there, what kind of development would happen in those areas. So you are able to get a variance. We have a variance section in our regulations. So if you find yourself proposing work closer than 35 feet, you have to fill out the variance, and the commission will review that. That's also reviewed by the Conservation Commission.
The Conservation Commission is made up of what, 8 or 9 members?
Sometimes it feels like 8 or 9, but it's really just 7.
It is, okay.
Yeah.
And they don't have to have any special training to be on there, right? So if you want to join the conservation, it'd be nice if you had some knowledge of something or another, but you don't have to have a degree in botany or anything.
That's right, and in this town, the Conservation Commission doesn't have any say on who's on the Conservation Commission and who's not on the Conservation Commission. That's all worked and run through the Select Board.
Right, that I knew. Let's talk about having to have a property flagged. What does that mean?
So typically, this all starts by someone coming in or someone reaching out to the Conservation Office, and we could look through our files and find out that we don't have any permits on that property, which would have been a trigger for myself to look deeper and find out if there was some flagging going on. So flagging in the wetland terms means to find out where that wetland line is. One side of that line is wet, one side of that line is dry. So the wetland line, it's delineated by a wetland scientist, but it's not official until the Conservation Commission approves that line. So they have the purview to go out and move the flags up and down based on their understanding. This is often done with the applicant's wetland scientist. So what ends up happening is we start talking about vegetation, soil, water within, at or near the surface of the ground, and we talk about all those factors. So it's true that some conservation commissioners don't have a lot of experience, and and that's why there's an administrator. But we do have some that have a few. We had a very powerful group when I first got here. A lot of them were in the business, if that's what you want to say. But it changes up all the time, and over those years of having, tough and people that understood the Wetlands Protection Act and didn't have to do much review, and they could just kind of talk about whatever comes up at the meetings, to the ones that are, working in different fields that aren't related to wetland. I think we've been very consistent since about 2012 on, and right there between 2011 when I first got here and 2012 we did change and reduce the amount of requirements in the regulations. So what we're looking at is a brand new regulations that kind of happened in those periods.
So what type of activities are allowed in, let's say you have conservation and you can't put a shed or a fence, or can you put a swing set? Can you put a trampoline? Can you play ball? Whatever.
Yeah, so it's always true that if you're in the regulated area, that 100-foot or that 200-foot, that you want to reach out, and you can always put a swing set in. But I think the problems come up over the years as people put in these, kids,
imagination stations.
Yeah, kids castle and all that. And those swing sets not only come with the support from the swing and the slide that kind of interrupt about 4 square inches to being just like a moat surrounding the swing set and the entire structure, and then that gets filled up with sand and it gets filled up with mulch or something like that. And so those need to be looked at, but I will let you know that for the most part, for swing sets, trampolines, there's always an accommodation made for those people, because it's unfortunate and it's happened to me and it might have happened to everybody here, but I found out as I kind of got older that the kids grow up.
No,
and
sure.
Yeah, and you take that swing set and you got to get rid of it.
Yeah.
And so if they say yes, if the commission says yes, then they usually say at the same time, at some point, we expect this to be removed and that to be turned back into lawn. I can't say, no matter what I say here tonight, I can't talk for the Conservation Commission. Right. So each application stands on its own, and I'm just telling you about some successes, but there may be some out there that didn't work out.
Okay. So you get to a house and you find out they took down 10 trees, and now because they're putting an addition on, and you find out those 10 trees should have come down. What's going to happen?
Yeah, so trees is a big problem. I think with Reading not working Friday, Saturday, and Sunday,
Lots of work is going on.
You can show up on Monday and be really surprised. We have a very active Conservation Commission. We have 3 people that are retired, And when calls come in, they always go out anytime, and they take a look. But if someone's cutting down trees, it always starts out with a letter that invites them into the Conservation Commission to talk about it. And then, you know, we want to get to the bottom of it. And so I think this is pretty obvious, but I just want to make sure that it's clear that the Wetlands Protection Act and the town's wetland regulations and bylaw are laws. So they are enforceable. And so it's not just another committee. You know, through the state, we have power to fine and to enforce and to do all these other things. I started out in Boxford in 2006, and before that I was at Massachusetts Association for Conservation Commissions, and what we did is we guided all of conservation, all the conservation commissions around the state. I mean, at that time my role was probably just emptying the trash, but whatever. But I was there and I understood how many questions come in. So, you know, it's different here in Reading, and it's different in Boxford, and every town is different. But in Reading, when you're doing conservation issues, I found out real quick that people want to talk to us. There's more realtors here talking to me than there ever were in Boxford.
That's because we have more realtors per capita in Reading. So we have to cut down now because we're running out of time. However, Chuck, I really wanted you on here because, you know, seriously, the minute you say the word conservation, people panic, oh my God! And I hear from builders and contractors, Reading's the toughest in the state. And you know what? I work in all sorts of towns, and
toughest in the state on
conservation. Yeah,
I have to disagree.
I don't know that that's true. I've always found you very easy to speak with, and I think the bottom line is call Chuck before you do anything, and he'll help you out. You know, when you go for a building permit, they generally, I know Kim down there will say, have you talked to conservation? You go to conservation. Have you talked to building? They're in the same office, just different office, the same location. So you really have to speak with both of them, because one hand really does need to know what the other one is doing. And an ounce of prevention, what do we say? It's worth a pound of cure. So Chuck, I really thank you for coming. And let me tell you, we could do an hour and a half easily. There is so much information, but we just don't want to bore everybody. So I hope you enjoyed the show. I hope you enjoyed the first half, having the captain on talking about smoke detectors, and certainly enjoyed having you, Chuck.
That's right. I guess, thank you, Bobby. And if anyone has any questions, your first step is to call the office. Reading's very friendly, and we want to hear your calls. We want to make sure that you understand what direction to go in. And so I would encourage you to give Conservation a call or shoot me an email.
Terrific. And Chuck answers his emails, by the way, all the time. Thank you, everybody. Enjoy the rest of this hot day.